The machine gun that weighed 12 pounds sat in the corner of Captain Melvin Johnson's Cambridge law office like an accusation. Outside, February snow blanketed Massachusetts in 1936. But inside, Johnson stared at blueprints that would challenge every assumption the United States Army held about automatic weapons. The M1 Garand had just been adopted. The Browning automatic rifle ruled squad tactics. And Johnson, a Harvard law graduate who wore the silver bars of a Marine Corps reserve captain, believed both decisions were wrong. Johnson had spent months at Springfield Armory as the Marine Corps observer, watching John Garand's rifle and John Pedersen's competing design undergo trials. Both weapons, Johnson concluded, suffered from fatal flaws. The Garand's N-block clip system meant a soldier couldn't top off his magazine without ejecting unfired rounds. The gas-operated mechanism relied on consistent propellant charges, a luxury wartime ammunition manufacturing wouldn't guarantee. Pedersen's design was even worse, a mechanical complexity that would fail in mud, sand, and salt spray. But Johnson saw something else. The Army Ordnance Department had already invested millions in the Garand's development. Institutional momentum, not battlefield effectiveness, was driving adoption decisions. The Marines, as always, would get whatever the Army didn't want in this case, leftover M1903 Springfield bolt-action rifles. Johnson pulled out a clean sheet of paper and began sketching a recoil-operated system that would outperform both competitors. The first prototype emerged from a Cambridge machine shop 3 months later. Johnson had paid $300 of his own money for what looked like a collection of scrap metal held together by a knitting needle firing pin. But when he pulled the trigger at a private range outside Boston, the mechanism worked. The barrel recoiled backward with the bolt locked in place. Pressure dropped as the bullet left the muzzle, and the bolt carrier continued rearward under momentum, cycling the action. 8 locking lugs, more than any contemporary rifle, secured the bolt to the chamber. The rotary magazine held 10 rounds and could be topped off without losing chambered ammunition. Johnson filed his patent application in April 1936. The same month, the Army officially designated the Garand as the M1. But Johnson wasn't building a rifle to compete with yesterday's decision. He was designing weapons for tomorrow's war. By late 1937, Johnson had developed 2 variants. The semi-automatic rifle shared the same recoil-operated principle with his light machine gun design. Both weapons used interchangeable parts. Both fired the standard .30-06 Springfield cartridge. Both featured quickly detachable barrels. The light machine gun incorporated a crucial innovation. It fired from a closed bolt in semi-automatic mode for accuracy, then switched to open bolt operation for sustained automatic fire to prevent cook-offs. The Johnson light machine gun weighed 12.5 pounds, 8 pounds lighter than the 20-pound Browning automatic rifle that equipped American infantry. Its 20-round curved magazine attached to the left side of the receiver, keeping the weapon's center of gravity closer to the operator's shoulder. Feed lips were machined into the receiver itself rather than the magazine, eliminating the most common cause of automatic weapon malfunctions. The rate of fire was adjustable from 300 to 900 rounds per minute by varying buffer spring tension. Most importantly, both Johnson weapons could be stripped down for transport. The barrel detached with a quarter turn of the accelerator mechanism. The buttstock separated from the receiver with 2 screws. For airborne operations, this meant a complete weapon system could be broken into components short enough to fit in a paratrooper's kit bag. Johnson demonstrated his designs to Army Ordnance in 1938. The trials at Aberdeen Proving Ground were thorough, over 6,000 rounds fired with only 12 minor stoppages. But the Ordnance Board's final report, dated February 23, 1940, was devastating. The Johnson rifle was too long and heavy for their requirements, and would not function reliably with the bayonet fitted. The light machine gun wasn't even formally evaluated. The rejection had nothing to do with performance. Army Ordnance had already committed to the Garand production line at Springfield Armory and Winchester. Adopting a second semi-automatic rifle would require new tooling, new training, new logistics chains. The Johnson's recoil operation meant the bayonet lug had to accommodate barrel movement, a complication the Army deemed unacceptable. Never mind that Johnson's magazine system was superior, or that his quick-change barrel would prevent overheating, or that his weapon was significantly more accurate. The institutional decision had been made. Johnson turned to foreign markets. Norway ordered samples in 1939, but the German invasion ended negotiations. The Chilean military ordered 1,000 rifles in 7mm Mauser caliber, delivered in 1943. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source: the Netherlands government in exile. The Dutch East Indies represented the crown jewel of the Netherlands colonial empire. When Germany overran Holland in May 1940, Queen Wilhelmina's government relocated to London, but her territories in Indonesia remained vulnerable to Japanese expansion. The Royal Netherlands East Indies Army needed modern weapons immediately, and American manufacturers were the only source capable of meeting demand. The Netherlands Purchasing Commission contacted Johnson in August 1940. After demonstrations at a private range, the Dutch placed an order that dwarfed Johnson's wildest expectations: 70,000 M1941 rifles and 500 light machine guns. The contract specified .30-06 Springfield chambering. Despite Dutch forces normally using 8mm Mauser ammunition, the Commission wanted weapons that could share ammunition with anticipated American reinforcements. Johnson had no manufacturing facility. His Johnson Automatics Trust was a legal entity, not an industrial operation. The solution came through Universal Windings Company of Providence, Rhode Island, which specialized in textile machinery. An agreement created the Cranston Arms Company in a former textile factory in Cranston, Rhode Island. The facility was less than 15 miles from Johnson's Cambridge office, close enough for daily oversight. The Cranston Arms Factory represented everything Johnson believed about weapons manufacturing. Unlike the massive government arsenals with their specialized tooling and rigid procedures, Cranston Arms used standard machine tools and skilled craftsmen. Johnson had designed his weapons specifically to avoid exotic manufacturing requirements. The receiver was machined from bar stock, the bolt was turned on conventional lathes, the barrel was rifle bored using standard equipment. A competent machinist could fabricate complete weapons without specialized dies or fixtures. Production began in 1941 with an initial workforce of 250 employees. The factory operated 2 shifts, 7 days a week. Quality control was obsessive. Every component was individually inspected, every completed weapon test fired. The result was firearms manufactured to a standard higher than most commercial sporting rifles, but the precision came at a cost. Each M1941 rifle required 47 hours of skilled labor. The light machine gun, with its more complex feeding mechanism and adjustable rate of fire system, needed 63 hours per unit. By December 1941, Cranston Arms had delivered 1,900 rifles to Dutch shipping agents. The weapons were crated for transport to Batavia, modern-day Jakarta, where they would equip native troops under Dutch command. But on December 7th, Japanese aircraft struck Pearl Harbor. On December 8th, Japanese forces invaded Malaya, Thailand, and Hong Kong. The East Indies became a combat zone before the remaining Johnson rifles could be delivered. The attack on Pearl Harbor transformed American war production overnight. Every manufacturer with defense contracts suddenly faced unlimited demand and critical material shortages. The remaining Dutch Johnson rifles, over 68,000 weapons, were embargoed to prevent capture by advancing Japanese forces. The completed rifles sat in Cranston Arms warehouse while lawyers negotiated their fate. The United States Marine Corps had been watching Johnson's development with professional interest. Unlike the Army, Marines couldn't afford to ignore superior weapons based on institutional politics. Marines had always made do with Army hand-me-downs, outdated equipment, insufficient quantities, obsolescent designs. If Johnson's weapons offered genuine advantages, Marines would find ways to use them. The newly formed Marine Parachute Battalions presented the perfect opportunity. Airborne operations demanded lightweight, compact weapons that could be quickly assembled after landing. The Johnson rifle's detachable barrel reduced its jump configuration to 36 inches shorter than an M1 Garand. The light machine gun could be broken down into 3 components that fit standard parachute equipment containers. Captain Harry Torgerson, executive officer of the 1st Parachute Battalion, visited Cranston Arms in spring 1942. Torgerson came from a Marine family. His father had earned the Medal of Honor during the Boxer Rebellion in 1900. The younger Torgerson was a parachute-qualified officer tasked with equipping Marines for a new kind of warfare. When Johnson offered 23 M1941 rifles from Dutch production for field testing, Torgerson accepted immediately. The rifles reached the 1st Parachute Battalion at Camp Lejeune just as the unit prepared for deployment to the Pacific. Serial numbers A0001 through A0023 represented the first Johnson rifles officially used by American forces. The Marines modified the weapons immediately. Front sight ears were removed to prevent snagging on parachute rigging. Rear peep sights were opened up with V-cuts for faster target acquisition. Some charging handles were modified to resemble M1 Garand controls for muscle memory compatibility. On August 7, 1942, the 1st Parachute Battalion landed on Gavutu Island in the Solomon Islands. The Johnson rifles saw their first combat against Japanese forces entrenched in coral caves and concrete bunkers. Marines reported that the Johnson's accuracy exceeded the M1 Garand, particularly at longer ranges where the heavier barrel and superior lockup showed advantage. The 10-round rotary magazine meant fewer reloads during firefights. The ability to top off magazines without ejecting unfired rounds proved valuable in prolonged engagements. But it was the Johnson light machine gun that truly distinguished itself in Pacific combat. The weapon's lightweight made it ideal for jungle warfare where machine gun teams had to traverse difficult terrain. The removable barrel allowed gunners to carry spare barrels for sustained fire missions, a capability the fixed-barrel Browning automatic rifle couldn't match. The adjustable rate of fire meant gunners could conserve ammunition with controlled bursts or unleash devastating automatic fire when enemy positions were identified. Marine Raider battalions soon acquired Johnson light machine guns as well. These elite units, modeled on British commandos, needed maximum firepower in minimum weight packages. The Johnson LMG delivered 800 to 900 rounds per minute from a weapon system that weighed less than 2/3 of a bar. For Marines who had to carry their equipment through swamps, over mountains, and across coral reefs, every pound mattered. The weapon's combat debut came during the Battle of Edson's Ridge on Guadalcanal in September 1942. Marine paratroopers equipped with Johnson LMGs established interlocking fields of fire across the ridge approaches. When Japanese forces launched their night attack, the Johnson gunners laid down a defensive crossfire that broke the assault. Marines reported firing several magazines from their Johnson LMGs, then quickly changing positions to confuse enemy observers trying to locate the automatic weapons. The high rate of fire created the impression of more machine guns than were actually present, disrupting Japanese tactical planning. Technical Sergeant Milan Grevich carried his Johnson LMG through the Bougainville campaign in November 1943. Grevich, a miner from Mountain Iron, Minnesota, had joined the 3rd Parachute Battalion and discovered an aptitude for automatic weapons. His Johnson LMG was fed by Assistant Gunner Private John Little, who carried 4 20-round magazines and several 5-round stripper clips for reloading. The Johnson's magazine system proved both advantageous and problematic in jungle warfare. The 20-round capacity provided sustained fire capability, but the long curved magazine made the weapon awkward to carry through dense vegetation. The high front sight, necessary because of the weapon's straight-line recoil design, frequently caught on vines and branches. Marines often removed the bipod to reduce weight and snag hazards, accepting reduced accuracy for improved mobility. Still, combat reports consistently praised the Johnson LMG's effectiveness. Marine after-action reports from Bougainville noted that Johnson gunners typically carried 4 or 5 magazines, reloaded with standard M1903 Springfield stripper clips. The weapon's inherent accuracy meant effective fire at ranges where the bar's open bolt operation made precision impossible. The removable barrel eliminated overheating problems that plagued other automatic weapons in tropical climates. When the 3rd Parachute Battalion was disbanded after Bougainville, Grevich was reassigned to G Company, 28th Marine Regiment, 5th Marine Division. The unit was forming for a top-secret operation against a fortified Japanese island. Grevich found himself in charge of the company's machine gun section, equipped with standard M1919A6 light machine guns that weighed 35 pounds and lacked the maneuverability he'd grown accustomed to with his Johnson LMG. The M1919A6 was a compromise weapon and aircraft design machine gun, adapted for infantry use through the addition of a buttstock, bipod, and carrying handle. It provided more firepower than the bar but remained fundamentally unsuited to mobile warfare. The weapon was heavy, the barrel couldn't be changed without tools, and the closed bolt design meant cook-offs were common during sustained firing. Grevich remembered his Johnson LMG from Bougainville. More importantly, he remembered that aircraft machine guns could be modified for ground use. While the 5th Marine Division trained for the invasion of Iwo Jima, Grevich began experimenting with surplus aviation weapons. The N/M2 aircraft machine gun was a lightened version of the standard M1919, designed for use as defensive armament on Navy bombers and flying boats. The weapon weighed 21.5 pounds compared to 35 pounds for the infantry M1919A6. Rate of fire was 1,350 rounds per minute, nearly double the standard infantry version. The high rate of fire was necessary for air-to-air combat where engagement windows lasted only seconds. The N/M2's design reflected its intended environment. The thin barrel relied on airflow for cooling during flight. The spade grip triggers were designed for use with aviation gloves. There was no buttstock, no bipod, no conventional sights. The weapon was optimized for installation in aircraft turrets where remote controls and optical sights provided operator interface. But the Pacific War produced abundant supplies of surplus aviation equipment. Every aircraft shot down, every bomber too damaged to fly, every flying boat cannibalized for spare parts yielded multiple N/M2 machine guns. Marine ordnance sections accumulated dozens of these weapons without any official use for them. Private William Colby of the 3rd Marine Regiment had attempted the first conversion during the Bougainville campaign in 1943. Colby simply attached a bipod to the front of an N/M2 barrel and used the weapon from a fixed position with its original spade grips. When Japanese forces attacked his position, Colby's improvised machine gun delivered devastating firepower that repelled the assault. But the weapon remained awkward to operate and couldn't be moved effectively during combat. Grevich and Little developed a more sophisticated approach. They obtained surplus N/M2 receivers from God knows where, as Grevich later recalled. The conversion required cutting down M1 Garand buttocks to fit the N/M2's rear buffer tube. Sheet metal was fashioned into a trigger mechanism that replaced the aircraft's spade grips. Bar bipods and rear sights were adapted to the N/M2 barrel. The result was a man-portable machine gun that retained the N/M2's devastating rate of fire while providing shoulder-fired accuracy. The conversion work was completed in Hawaii during the 5th Marine Division's final training phase. Grevich and Little fabricated 6 weapons total, each requiring approximately 80 hours of machine shop work. The modifications were approved at company and battalion level. These weren't unauthorized weapons, but officially sanctioned field expedients designed to provide additional firepower for the assault on Iwo Jima. The Marines dubbed their creation the Stinger because of its extremely high rate of fire. The name reflected both the weapon's aggressive capability and its tendency to sting operators who weren't prepared for the violent recoil of 1,350 rounds per minute. The Stinger retained most of the N/M2's original operating characteristics while adding shoulder-fired stability and conventional sights. Each Stinger weighed approximately 23 pounds, loaded 2 pounds heavier than the original N/M2 due to the added buttstock and bipod, but still 12 pounds lighter than the standard M1919A6. The weapon fired from an open bolt, which prevented cook-offs but reduced first-round accuracy. Effective range was approximately 800 yards, limited more by the operator's ability to control automatic fire than by the weapon's ballistic performance. 5 of the 6 Stingers were distributed within G Company 28th Marines. 1 went to each rifle platoon's machine gun team, 1 to the company's demolition section, and 1 remained with Grevich as section leader. The 6th Stinger was assigned to Corporal Tony Stein of a Company 28th Marines. Stein, a machinist from Dayton, Ohio, had assisted in the weapons fabrication and was considered the most qualified operator outside G Company. Corporal Stein represented everything the Marine Corps valued in an individual Marine. Born Anthony Stein in 1921, he had enlisted immediately after Pearl Harbor despite his essential worker status at the Delco factory in Dayton. Stein was physically powerful, mechanically gifted, and completely fearless in combat. His civilian machinist skills had proven valuable in modifying equipment for combat use. When Grevich needed assistance with the Stinger fabrication, Stein was the obvious choice. The Stingers accompanied the 28th Marines to Iwo Jima aboard LST-779, packed in special containers designed to protect the modified weapons during amphibious assault. Each Stinger gunner carried 800 rounds of .30-06 ammunition in addition to the weapon itself. The ammunition load was distributed among squad members to reduce individual carrying weight, but represented enough firepower to sustain combat for several minutes at maximum rate of fire. Iwo Jima represented everything the Japanese had learned about defensive warfare during 3 years of Pacific combat. The island was a fortress built from volcanic rock and reinforced concrete, defended by over 20,000 Japanese troops equipped with artillery, mortars, and machine guns. General Tadamaki Kurabayashi had abandoned the traditional Japanese tactic of beach defense in favor of defense in depth. American forces would be allowed to land, then systematically destroyed by interlocking fire from concealed positions. The assault began at 0900 hours on February 19, 1945. The first waves of landing craft approached Green Beach 1 under the shadow of Mount Suribachi, the volcanic cone that dominated Iwo Jima's southern tip. Japanese observers in concrete bunkers watched through periscopes as Marines crossed the beach and advanced inland. No fire was returned. The silence was ominous. Corporal Stein was among the first Marines to establish a defensive position beyond the beach. His squad had been tasked with providing covering fire as follow-on waves landed and organized for the advance inland. Stein positioned his Stinger to overlook the most likely avenues of Japanese counterattack, using the volcanic terrain for concealment while maintaining clear fields of fire. At 10:20 hours, Japanese mortars began falling on the beachhead. The barrage was precise and devastating, targeting landing craft, supply dumps, and command posts. Within minutes, the carefully organized assault devolved into chaos as Marines sought cover from the indirect fire. It was exactly what Kurabayashi had planned: draw the Americans inland, then destroy them with pre-registered artillery. Japanese machine gun positions began engaging individual Marines as they moved across the broken terrain. The positions were expertly camouflaged and mutually supporting. As soon as Marines located one gun and began maneuvering against it, supporting positions would open fire from different angles. The interlocking fire system created kill zones that channeled American movement into predetermined engagement areas. Stein recognized the tactical situation immediately. His squad was pinned down by crossfire from at least 3 Japanese positions. Conventional infantry tactics called for indirect fire support or flank attacks, but no artillery was available and the terrain offered no covered approaches. Stein made a decision that would define his legacy. He would use the Stinger's overwhelming firepower to suppress Japanese positions by direct assault. The Stinger's 1,350 rounds per minute rate of fire meant Stein could deliver more bullets on target in 30 seconds than a conventional machine gun could fire in 2 minutes. But the high rate of fire came with limitations. A 20-round magazine lasted less than 1 second at maximum rate. Stein had to fire controlled bursts to conserve ammunition while maintaining suppressive effect. Stein stood up in full view of Japanese positions and began engaging the nearest machine gun bunker. The Stinger's muzzle flash was enormous, a 3-foot tongue of flame that instantly revealed his position to every Japanese observer. But the weapon's accuracy was devastating. .30-06 bullets struck the bunker aperture with machine-like precision, forcing Japanese gunners to take cover. With the nearest position suppressed, Stein advanced directly toward the bunker while continuing to fire. The Stinger's weight made aimed fire from a standing position extremely difficult, but Stein's machinist background had given him the upper body strength necessary to control the weapon. He fired short bursts while advancing, reloaded during brief pauses in cover, then resumed the assault. The first Japanese bunker was neutralized within 3 minutes. Stein had expended 4 magazines' 80 rounds to suppress the position, then eliminated the crew with grenades. But his ammunition supply was already depleted to dangerous levels. The Stinger's effectiveness came at the cost of enormous ammunition consumption. Stein made 8 separate trips back to the beach to resupply ammunition during the first day of battle. Each trip meant crossing 800 yards of open ground under enemy observation, but Stein used these movements to rescue wounded Marines who couldn't reach safety on their own. He carried wounded men to the beach, picked up ammunition, and returned to continue the assault. During his ammunition runs, Stein removed his helmet and boots to reduce weight and increase speed. The image of a Marine running across a battlefield in stocking feet while carrying wounded comrades became iconic among the forces at Iwo Jima. Stein's combination of individual heroism and tactical innovation exemplified everything the Marine Corps hoped to achieve through superior training and equipment. By 1700 hours on February 19th, Stein's squad had advanced farther inland than any other unit in the 28th Marines. His Stinger had neutralized at least 20 Japanese fighting positions, killing an estimated 40 enemy soldiers. The weapon had been shot out of his hands twice by Japanese rifle fire, but Stein had continued the assault with a spare weapon carried by his assistant gunner. The cost of this success was enormous ammunition consumption. Stein's squad had expended over 2,000 rounds of .30-06 ammunition, nearly triple the normal load for a Marine rifle squad. But the tactical result justified the logistical investment. Stein's aggressive use of the Stinger had broken Japanese defensive coordination in his sector, allowing other Marines to advance with reduced casualties. Similar success was achieved by other Stinger gunners throughout the 28th Marines. Sergeant Grevich used his weapon to support the company's main assault, while other gunners provided covering fire for demolition teams attacking fortified positions. The Stinger's high rate of fire proved particularly effective against Japanese spider holes and cave positions where conventional weapons couldn't deliver sufficient volume of fire. But the Stinger's tactical advantages came with significant operational limitations. The weapon's rapid ammunition consumption meant gunners required constant resupply. The high rate of fire generated enormous heat, causing cook-offs and barrel damage when sustained firing was necessary. The conversion work, performed under field conditions, wasn't always reliable. Several Stingers experienced mechanical failures during combat. Most critically, the Stinger's effectiveness depended entirely on the individual operator's skill and courage. The weapon was too heavy for most Marines to fire accurately from unsupported positions. The enormous muzzle flash made the gunner a priority target for every enemy soldier within sight. Operating a Stinger effectively required a combination of physical strength, mechanical aptitude, and absolute fearlessness that few individuals possessed. Corporal Stein embodied all these qualities. Over the following days, he continued using his Stinger to spearhead Marine advances against increasingly desperate Japanese resistance. His tactics evolved as he learned the weapon's capabilities and limitations. Short bursts for suppression, magazine changes behind cover, ammunition management to sustain engagement capability, movement techniques that minimized exposure time. On February 23rd, Stein participated in the assault on Mount Suribachi that culminated in the flag raising photographed by Joe Rosenthal. But Stein was wounded during the preliminary fighting and evacuated to a hospital ship offshore. His combat role at Iwo Jima should have ended with medical evacuation, but Stein learned that his regiment was taking heavy casualties in the assault on Hill 362A in the island's northern sector. Against medical advice and direct orders to remain aboard ship, Stein returned to combat on March 1st. He rejoined his unit just as they prepared to assault a complex of Japanese bunkers and cave positions that had resisted previous attacks. Stein volunteered to lead a reconnaissance patrol to identify enemy positions before the main assault. The patrol advanced through broken terrain pocked with shell craters and littered with the debris of previous attacks. Japanese defenders had learned to target Marine patrol leaders and automatic weapons operators. Snipers equipped with telescopic sights focused on Marines carrying distinctive equipment or displaying leadership behavior. Stein, armed with his distinctive Stinger and moving at the front of the patrol, represented an ideal target. At 11:30 hours, a Japanese sniper's bullet struck Stein in the head, killing him instantly. The patrol recovered his body and the Stinger, but the weapon that had dominated Japanese positions for 2 weeks fell silent. Tony Stein was 24 years old when he died on the volcanic slopes of Iwo Jima, having demonstrated that individual courage and superior weapons could overcome even the most sophisticated defensive systems. The Johnson Light Machine Guns Pacific Service extended beyond the Marine Corps. The United States Army's first Special Service Force, known as the Devil's Brigade, acquired 125 Johnson LMGs through a direct exchange with Marine units. The force traded plastic explosives to Marines in return for the Johnson weapons, which proved ideal for the unit's specialized mission requirements. The first Special Service Force was a joint American-Canadian unit formed for operations behind enemy lines. Originally conceived for raids against German installations in Norway, the unit was eventually deployed to Italy where it operated in mountainous terrain, unsuited to conventional infantry weapons. The Johnson LMG's lightweight and removable barrel made it perfect for the force's requirement to carry equipment over long distances through difficult terrain. Colonel Robert Frederick, the force's commanding officer, recognized that conventional infantry tactics wouldn't succeed in the Italian mountains. His troops needed maximum firepower in minimum weight packages, along with the ability to move quickly between objectives without being detected by German patrols. The Johnson LMG provided automatic weapon capability that approached that of the bar while weighing 8 pounds less. The force's Johnson LMGs first saw action during the assault on Monte la Difensa in December 1943. German forces had fortified the mountain with concrete bunkers and wire obstacles that commanded the approaches to Rome. Previous Allied attacks had failed with heavy casualties. Frederick's plan called for a night assault up the mountain's supposedly unclimbable north face, bypassing German defensive positions and attacking from an unexpected direction. The assault began at midnight on December 1st. Force reconnaissance teams had identified narrow ledges and rock chimneys that provided routes to the summit, but the climb required ropes and specialized equipment. Each man carried minimum equipment rifle, ammunition, grenades, and rations for 3 days. Machine gun teams carried disassembled Johnson LMGs with barrels and receivers distributed among squad members. The climb took 6 hours over terrain so difficult that conventional military wisdom deemed it impossible. German sentries heard noise during the night but attributed it to falling rocks or small animals. No defensive preparations were made. At dawn on December 2nd, force assault teams reached the summit and discovered German positions from the rear, completely surprising the defenders. The Johnson LMGs proved decisive in the subsequent fighting. Force machine gun teams quickly assembled their weapons and established firing positions that dominated German escape routes. The high rate of fire and accuracy allowed small teams to control large areas, preventing German reinforcements from reaching the summit while force demolition teams systematically destroyed defensive positions. Captain Loren Whaling of the 2nd Regiment carried his Johnson LMG through 3 days of continuous combat on Monte la Difensa. His weapon was fed by Corporal James Flack, a Canadian volunteer who managed ammunition supply and target identification. Together, they accounted for over 60 German casualties while expending 47 magazines of 20 rounds, each nearly 1,000 rounds of .30-06 ammunition. Whaling's after-action report praised the Johnson LMG's reliability under extreme conditions. The weapon had been disassembled for transport, exposed to freezing temperatures and precipitation, reassembled in darkness, and fired continuously for 72 hours without maintenance. Despite this abuse, the Johnson experienced only 2 stoppages, both due to damaged ammunition rather than weapon malfunction. The force's success at Monte la Difensa led to deployment at Anzio, where Johnson LMGs again proved their value in defensive operations. The Anzio beachhead was a confined space surrounded by German positions on higher ground. Conventional defensive tactics called for linear positions with mutually supporting strong points, but the force used Johnson LMGs in mobile roles that maximized the weapon's tactical flexibility. Lieutenant Thomas McWilliam organized Johnson LMG teams into roving patrols that moved between sectors based on enemy activity. When German forces attacked in one area, Johnson gunners would rapidly reposition to provide supporting fire. The weapon's lightweight made these movements possible, while their devastating firepower often decided local engagements in favor of the defenders. The Johnson LMG's performance in Italy attracted attention from British and Canadian forces operating in the same theater. Several Commonwealth units requested access to Johnson weapons for evaluation, leading to limited trials by British commando units and Canadian Special Operations Forces. The results were uniformly positive, but production limitations prevented wider adoption. Similar positive evaluations came from Johnson LMGs used by Philippine forces during the Japanese occupation from 1942 to 1945. Philippine Army units and Philippine Constabulary forces had received Johnson weapons through various channels, including transfers from Dutch East Indies stocks and direct delivery from American sources. The weapons proved particularly effective in guerrilla operations where mobility and firepower were equally important. Major Eduardo Santos of the Philippine Army's 4th Infantry Regiment operated a Johnson LMG team during the Bataan Peninsula campaign in early 1942. Santos had trained with American advisors before the war and understood the tactical principles behind automatic weapon employment. His weapon was operated by Sergeant Maximo Valdez, a former police officer who had learned machine gun techniques during pre-war constabulary service. Santos and Valdez used their Johnson LMG in hit-and-run attacks against Japanese supply convoys moving through central Luzon. The weapon's accuracy allowed engagement at ranges where Japanese return fire was ineffective, while its light weight permitted rapid withdrawal before Japanese forces could organize pursuit. Over 6 months of guerrilla operations, the team claimed over 100 Japanese casualties while avoiding capture or serious engagement with Japanese main forces. The Johnson LMG continued in Philippine service after the war ended. Philippine Army units deployed to Korea as part of the Philippine Expeditionary Forces to Korea carried Johnson weapons from 1950 to 1955. The weapons proved effective in Korean combat conditions, particularly during the Chinese intervention when United Nations forces faced overwhelming numbers of enemy infantry. Captain Romeo Espino commanded a Johnson LMG section during the Chinese offensive in November 1950. His 3 weapons provided defensive fire for Filipino positions near the Imjin River as Chinese forces attempted to break through United Nations lines. The Johnson LMG's high rate of fire proved decisive in breaking up massed infantry attacks, while their accuracy allowed engagement of individual targets at extended range. Espino's section expended over 12,000 rounds of .30-06 ammunition during the 3-day battle, accounting for an estimated 200 Chinese casualties. The weapons functioned reliably despite sub-zero temperatures and limited maintenance, demonstrating the robust design that had made them effective in Pacific combat conditions years earlier. Post-war analysis of Johnson LMG performance revealed consistent patterns across different theaters and tactical situations. The weapon's lightweight and rapid change barrel made it ideal for mobile operations where traditional machine guns were too heavy or inflexible. The accuracy inherent in the closed bolt design provided precision fire capability that complemented the high rate of fire option for suppressive missions. However, the same analysis identified limitations that prevented wider adoption. The 20-round magazine, while manageable, provided less sustained fire capability than belt-fed weapons. The complex manufacturing requirements made the weapon expensive to produce compared to simpler alternatives. Most critically, the weapon's effectiveness depended on highly trained operators who understood both its capabilities and limitations. The United States Army's Ordnance Technical Intelligence teams conducted comprehensive evaluations of captured Johnson weapons after the war ended. German, Japanese, and Italian intelligence services had obtained examples of Johnson rifles and light machine guns through various means, leading to detailed technical analysis by enemy weapons experts. German technical intelligence evaluated a Johnson LMG captured during 1st Special Service Force operations in Italy. The analysis, conducted by Waffenamt technical staff at the Spandau testing facility, praised the weapon's innovative design while noting production complexities that would make German manufacture difficult. The report concluded that the Johnson LMG represented advanced American thinking in automatic weapons design, but was unsuited to German industrial capabilities under wartime conditions. Japanese technical intelligence analysis of Johnson weapons captured in the Philippines reached similar conclusions. The report, prepared by the Army Technical Bureau in Tokyo, noted that the Johnson's recoil operation was mechanically sophisticated, but required precision manufacturing beyond Japanese current capabilities. The analysis recommended development of indigenous designs based on Johnson principles but adapted to Japanese production methods. Italian intelligence analysis was more limited, based primarily on examination of weapons captured during Anzio operations. The report, prepared by the Ministry of War's Technical Section, focused on tactical applications rather than manufacturing considerations. Italian analysts concluded that the Johnson LMG was highly effective in defensive roles, but noted that ammunition consumption was excessive for sustained operations. These enemy assessments confirmed what American forces had learned through combat experience. The Johnson LMG was tactically superior to most contemporary weapons but required industrial capabilities and training standards that few nations could match. The weapon's effectiveness was directly proportional to the resources invested in its production and employment. The broader strategic impact of Johnson weapons extended beyond their direct combat contributions. The weapons represented American industrial flexibility and innovation under wartime pressure. Unlike the standardized production systems favored by other combatant nations, American industry proved capable of developing and manufacturing specialized weapons for specific tactical requirements. The Cranston Arms Company's production methods exemplified this flexibility. The facility produced high-quality weapons using skilled craftsmen and standard machine tools rather than specialized production lines. This approach allowed rapid design changes and quality improvements that would have been impossible in conventional armament factories. The result was weapons that incorporated the latest technical innovations while maintaining production efficiency. By war's end, Cranston Arms had produced approximately 9,500 Johnson light machine guns along with 30,000 rifles. Total production value exceeded $15 million, making Johnson Automatics one of the most successful small arms manufacturers of the war despite operating from a single facility with fewer than 500 employees. The company's success attracted attention from post-war military planners who recognized the advantages of distributed weapons production. Rather than concentrating all manufacturing in government arsenals, the Johnson experience demonstrated that private industry could develop and produce specialized weapons more efficiently than traditional military-industrial systems. This lesson influenced post-war weapons development programs including the AR-10 and AR-15 rifle projects that eventually became the M16. Eugene Stoner's design team at Armalite incorporated several Johnson innovations, particularly the multi-lug rotating bolt that provided superior lockup compared to conventional designs. Melvin Johnson served as a consultant to Armalite during the AR-15's development, ensuring that lessons learned from Johnson LMG combat experience influenced the new weapons design. The Johnson LMG's influence extended to foreign weapons development as well. Israel's development of the Dror light machine gun in 1948 was directly based on captured Johnson weapons obtained during the Arab-Israeli War. The Israeli Haganah developed two patterns of the Dror, chambered for both 303 British and 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser to accommodate available ammunition supplies. The Dror incorporated Johnson design principles while adapting to Israeli manufacturing capabilities. The weapon retained the side-mounted magazine and recoil operation but simplified internal mechanisms to reduce production complexity. Approximately 1,000 Pattern 1 weapons were manufactured before design problems forced development of the improved Pattern 2 variant. Cuban revolutionary forces also used Johnson weapons during the 1957 revolution that brought Fidel Castro to power. Ernesto Che Guevara reportedly carried a Johnson LMG during guerrilla operations in the Sierra Maestra Mountains, praising the weapon's effectiveness in hit-and-run attacks against Cuban army positions. The Johnson's lightweight made it ideal for guerrilla operations where forces had to move quickly through difficult terrain. Similar adoption occurred in other revolutionary conflicts throughout the 1950s and 60s. Johnson weapons captured from surrendering forces or obtained through arms dealers found their way to insurgent organizations worldwide. The weapon's effectiveness in small unit operations made it valuable for forces that lacked access to conventional military equipment. The technical legacy of Johnson weapons extended far beyond their direct military applications. The recoil-operated mechanism pioneered in the Johnson LMG influenced development of numerous post-war automatic weapons. The multi-lug rotating bolt became standard in many rifle designs, while the adjustable rate of fire system was incorporated into specialized applications requiring variable automatic fire capability. The Johnson's magazine system also influenced post-war developments. The side-mounted configuration was adopted by several European weapons, while the machined feed lips integrated into the receiver became standard practice for reliability-critical applications. These innovations demonstrated that careful engineering could solve traditional automatic weapon problems through mechanical design rather than operational procedures. Most significantly, the Johnson weapons demonstrated that small-scale manufacturing could produce superior military equipment when properly organized and managed. The Cranston Arms facility's success challenged conventional wisdom about armament production, showing that innovation and quality could be more important than scale and standardization. This lesson proved prophetic during the Cold War when technological superiority became more important than numerical advantage. The Johnson example influenced American defense policy toward supporting innovative small manufacturers rather than concentrating all production in large government facilities. The result was a more flexible and responsive defense industrial base that could adapt quickly to changing tactical requirements. The human cost of Johnson weapon employment was significant but proportional to their tactical effectiveness. Units equipped with Johnson LMGs generally achieved their objectives with fewer casualties than comparable units using conventional weapons. The weapon's superior accuracy and firepower allowed small forces to accomplish missions that would have required larger formations with conventional equipment. Corporal Tony Stein's posthumous Medal of Honor citation specifically mentioned his personally improvised aircraft-type weapon, the only official recognition of the Stinger program in wartime documentation. The citation noted that Stein's weapon enabled him to provide rapid covering fire that saved numerous Marine lives while achieving tactical objectives that conventional weapons couldn't accomplish. Similar individual heroism was demonstrated by Johnson LMG operators throughout the Pacific War. The weapon attracted Marines who combined mechanical aptitude with aggressive tactical instincts. These individuals understood that the Johnson's superior capabilities came with increased responsibility and risk. They accepted both willingly in pursuit of tactical advantage. The psychological impact of Johnson weapons on enemy forces was documented through prisoner interrogations and captured documents. Japanese soldiers reported that the Johnson LMG's distinctive sound and high rate of fire created disproportionate psychological effect compared to conventional American automatic weapons. The weapon's accuracy at extended range disrupted Japanese tactical planning that relied on precise knowledge of American weapon capabilities. German forces in Italy reported similar reactions to 1st Special Service Force Johnson LMGs. The weapon's effectiveness in mountainous terrain where conventional machine guns were less effective forced German units to modify their defensive tactics. Positions that would have been safe from bar fire had to be relocated when Johnson-equipped forces were identified in the area. The tactical flexibility provided by Johnson weapons allowed American forces to adapt their operations to enemy capabilities rather than accepting limitations imposed by equipment. This represented a fundamental shift in military thinking from standardized tactics based on standard equipment to customized operations optimized for specific missions. The broader strategic implications of this approach extended beyond World War II. The Johnson experience demonstrated that superior equipment, properly employed, could multiply force effectiveness far beyond numerical ratios. Small units with superior weapons could accomplish missions that would require much larger forces with conventional equipment. This principle became central to American military doctrine during the Cold War when nuclear weapons made large conventional forces vulnerable to catastrophic loss. The emphasis shifted toward smaller, more capable units equipped with superior weapons and supported by advanced technology. The Johnson LMG's tactical success provided early validation of this approach. The industrial lessons of Johnson weapon production were equally significant. The Cranston Arms facility demonstrated that American industry could rapidly develop and produce specialized military equipment without massive government investment or long development periods. The entire program from initial concept to combat deployment took less than 5 years and required minimal government resources beyond the initial Dutch contract. This model influenced post-war defense procurement policies that emphasized private sector innovation over government-controlled development. The result was a defense industrial base that proved more adaptive and innovative than the centralized systems used by potential adversaries during the Cold War. The technical innovations incorporated in Johnson weapons continued influencing firearms development long after the original weapons became obsolete. The AR-15's rotating bolt, the FN-FAL's tilting bolt system, the HK-G3's delayed blowback operation all incorporated principles first explored in Johnson designs. Modern infantry weapons owe substantial debt to innovations pioneered in a Rhode Island textile factory during World War II. The human stories behind Johnson weapons remain compelling because they demonstrate individual initiative and courage under extreme circumstances. Melvin Johnson's decision to challenge institutional orthodoxy with superior design, Tony Stein's willingness to risk everything for tactical advantage, Milan Grevich's innovative problem-solving under combat conditions. These examples illustrate the qualities that enabled American victory in World War II. More broadly, the Johnson story demonstrates that warfare rewards innovation, courage, and adaptability over institutional conformity. The weapons succeeded because individuals recognized their potential and were willing to accept risks associated with unproven technology. This entrepreneurial approach to military problems became characteristic of American military culture and provided significant advantages throughout the Cold War. The technical specifications that made Johnson weapons effective also limited their adoption. The precision manufacturing required for reliable operation made the weapons expensive compared to simpler alternatives. The training required for effective employment was more extensive than most military organizations could provide. The logistical support needed for sustained operations exceeded standard supply capabilities. These limitations explain why Johnson weapons remained specialized rather than standard issue. They were too good for general use. Their capabilities exceeded the requirements and resources of typical military units. Only elite formations with exceptional personnel and superior support could fully utilize the weapon's potential. This pattern repeated throughout military history. Superior weapons that required superior operators and support systems. The Johnson example provided early insight into the relationship between technological capability and organizational capacity that became central to modern military planning. The legacy of Johnson weapons extends beyond their direct military contributions to broader questions about innovation, risk-taking, and organizational culture in wartime. The weapons succeeded because individuals were willing to challenge established procedures and accept responsibility for unproven approaches. This entrepreneurial culture enabled American forces to maintain technological superiority throughout World War II and beyond. The lesson remains relevant today as military forces face rapidly evolving threats that require innovative solutions. The Johnson experience demonstrates that small teams with superior equipment and exceptional training can achieve results far beyond their numerical strength. This principle continues influencing military doctrine and equipment development in contemporary conflicts. The industrial legacy of Johnson weapons production provided a model for future defense manufacturing that emphasized flexibility over scale, innovation over standardization. The Cranston Arms facility's success with limited resources and specialized production methods demonstrated that American industry could respond rapidly to changing military requirements without massive government investment. This model became particularly important during the Cold War when technological competition replaced industrial mass production as the decisive factor in military capability. The ability to rapidly develop and deploy innovative weapons systems provided strategic advantages that numerical superiority alone could not match. The human cost of these innovations was substantial but necessary for ultimate victory. The Marines and soldiers who carried Johnson weapons into combat accepted increased risk in return for superior capability. Their courage and skill enabled the weapons to achieve their tactical potential while providing lessons that influenced future military development. The technical achievements represented by Johnson weapons were remarkable for their time and remain impressive by contemporary standards. The precision manufacturing, innovative design, and superior performance achieved by a small Rhode Island company during wartime production schedules demonstrated American industrial capability at its finest. These weapons represented more than mechanical achievements. They embodied the innovative spirit and willingness to challenge orthodoxy that characterized American military culture during World War II. The Johnson story illustrates how individual initiative and technical excellence combined to produce weapons that exceeded the performance of standardized alternatives while requiring exceptional people to realize their potential. The strategic impact of Johnson weapons extended far beyond their direct combat contributions. They demonstrated American capability to develop and produce specialized military equipment rapidly and efficiently. They provided tactical advantages that enabled small forces to accomplish missions requiring much larger conventional formations. Most importantly, They established precedents for innovation and risk-taking that influenced American military culture throughout the Cold War and beyond. Today, as military forces face new challenges requiring innovative solutions, the Johnson experience provides valuable lessons about the relationship between technological capability and organizational culture. Superior weapons remain only as effective as the people who employ them and the systems that support them. The Johnson legacy reminds us that winning wars requires more than superior equipment. It demands superior people willing to accept the risks and responsibilities that come with technological advantage.